The convent gates felt heavier than iron as Evangeline Owens pushed them open for the last time. Her small canvas bag clutched in trembling hands, her 22 years of life suddenly stretching before her like an unmarked trail across the frontier. She had left a note for the Mother Superior, words that barely explained the restlessness burning in her chest, the desperate need to know what it meant to choose her own path rather than follow the one mapped out since childhood when her widowed father had delivered her to the Sisters of Mercy in Chicago, too grief-stricken to raise a daughter alone. The Illinois summer heat hit her face as she stepped onto the dusty street, the year 1878 stretching before her with possibility and terror in equal measure. She wore a simple gray dress, modest and plain, her dark auburn hair pinned severely beneath a bonnet, her green eyes scanning the unfamiliar streets of Galesburg with the wariness of a deer stepping into a clearing. The railroad town bustled with activity, wagons rumbling past, men in wide-brimmed hats leading horses, women in calico dresses hurrying between storefronts, and everywhere the smell of dust and horse manure, and something wild she could not name. Evangeline had exactly $12 sewn into the lining of her bag, money saved from years of mending work the convent had allowed her to do for townspeople. It was not much, but it was hers, earned by her own hands, and the weight of it felt like freedom. "Watch yourself, miss," a gruff voice called as a freight wagon nearly clipped her skirts. She jumped back, heart hammering, realizing she had wandered into the middle of the street like a fool. This was nothing like the quiet, ordered world of the convent where every hour had its purpose, and every footstep echoed in familiar corridors. She needed work. The thought settled in her stomach like a stone. The $12 would last perhaps 2 weeks if she was careful, less if she had to pay for lodging. Her skills were limited. She could read and write, she could sew, she could cook simple meals, she could tend the sick. The sisters had taught her these things, never imagining she would use them anywhere but in service to the church. The first boarding house turned her away. The proprietress, a stern woman with suspicious eyes, looked her up and down and said they had no rooms available, though Evangeline could see the vacancy sign still hanging in the window. The second place quoted a price so high she knew it was meant to discourage her. By the third rejection, she understood. A young woman alone, with no family, no references, no husband, was an object of suspicion in a town like this. The sun climbed higher, and sweat trickled down her back beneath the heavy fabric of her dress. She found herself walking toward the edge of town, where the buildings grew shabbier and the streets less crowded. A small restaurant with peeling paint and a crooked sign reading Molly's Kitchen caught her eye, mainly because a handwritten note in the window said, "Help wanted." The woman inside was kneading bread dough with flour-dusted hands, her round face red from the heat of the kitchen. She looked up when the bell above the door jangled, and her expression shifted from irritation to curiosity. "You hear about the job?" Molly asked, not bothering with pleasantries. "Yes, madam," Evangeline said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I can cook and clean. I'm a hard worker." Molly studied her for a long moment, taking in the modest dress, the careful posture, the desperate hope in her eyes. "You running from something?" "No, madam." "Running toward something, perhaps. My own life." Something in Molly's expression softened. "Convent girl," Evangeline nodded, surprised at how easily the woman had read her. "Had a sister who tried the religious life once," Molly said, returning to her dough. "Did not take. You get room and board plus $2 a week. Work starts at dawn, ends when the last customer leaves. Sundays you get the afternoon off after the lunch rush. You steal from me, you are out on your ear. You bring trouble, same thing. Understood?" "Yes, madam. Thank you, madam." Stop with the madam business. Makes me feel ancient. Call me Molly. You got a name, Evangeline. Evangeline Owens. Well, Evangeline Owens, you can start by washing those dishes. Rooms upstairs, second door on the left. It is not much, but it is clean. The room was indeed small, barely large enough for a narrow bed, a washstand, and a trunk, but it had a window that looked out onto the street, and the bed had a quilt that someone had stitched with care. Evangeline set down her bag and sat on the edge of the mattress, her hands shaking now that she was alone. She had done it. She had left. She was here in this room in this town, and tomorrow she would wake up and make her own choices. The tears came then, hot and unexpected, a mixture of fear and relief and something that might have been joy. She allowed herself 5 minutes to cry, then washed her face in the basin, pinned her hair more securely, and went downstairs to wash dishes. The work was hard, harder than anything she had done at the convent. Molly ran the restaurant with efficiency born of long experience, and she expected Evangeline to keep pace. There were dishes to wash, floors to scrub, vegetables to chop, bread to bake, and an endless stream of customers who came in for breakfast, dinner, and supper. Railroad workers, merchants, cattlemen, drifters, all manner of people passed through Molly's kitchen, and Evangeline learned quickly to keep her head down and her hands busy. She had been there 3 weeks when Zachary Dalton walked in. He came through the door just before noon, a tall man in dusty trail clothes, his dark hair curling slightly beneath his hat, his face tanned and weathered in a way that spoke of years in the sun. He moved with an easy confidence, pulling off his hat as he entered, revealing eyes the color of storm clouds. He was perhaps 26 or 27, with strong features and a mouth that looked like it smiled often, though at the moment his expression was serious. "Molly around?" he asked, and his voice was deep and warm. Evangeline, carrying a tray of dirty dishes, paused. "She is in the back. Can I help you?" He looked at her then, really looked, and something in his gaze made her breath catch. It was not improper or forward, but rather curious and kind, as if he was seeing past the gray dress and severe hairstyle to the person beneath. "Just wanted to let her know I will be bringing some supplies by later. Got a good price on potatoes and onions in the next county. Figured she might be interested." "I will tell her," Evangeline said, and hurried toward the kitchen, aware of his eyes following her. "Who was that?" she asked Molly, trying to sound casual. "Zach Dalton. Good man. Runs a small ranch outside town, brings in vegetables and sometimes beef. Fair prices, honest dealing. Why?" "No reason. He said he would bring supplies later." Molly gave her a knowing look but said nothing. Zachary returned that evening just as the supper rush was ending, driving a wagon loaded with crates. Evangeline watched from the window as he and Molly inspected the goods, haggling in the good-natured way of old acquaintances. When they shook hands on the deal, he started unloading crates, his muscles moving beneath his shirt with easy strength. "Evangeline, come help bring these in," Molly called. She went outside, the evening air cooler now, and reached for one of the smaller crates. Zachary was faster, lifting it before she could. "I can get that," she said. "I am sure you can, but I am already holding it," he replied, and there was that smile she had imagined, warm and genuine. "Where does Molly want these?" "The storeroom. Through there." They worked in companionable silence, carrying crates back and forth. On the last trip, their hands brushed as they both reached for the same box, and Evangeline jerked back as if burned. "Sorry," she murmured. "No harm done." He studied her for a moment. "You are new in town." "A few weeks now." "Where are you from?" The directness of the question startled her. At the convent, personal questions had been discouraged, privacy valued above curiosity. But this was the wider world and people asked questions. Chicago, originally. I have been at a convent there since I was young. And now you are here. And now I am here, she agreed. You like it? Galesburg, I mean. She considered the question seriously. I do not know yet. It is different from what I knew, but different is what I wanted. Something flickered in his eyes, understanding perhaps. Different can be good. Takes some getting used to, though. Yes. Molly emerged from the storeroom, wiping her hands on her apron. All set, Zach. You staying for supper? Got some stew left. Would not turn down your stew, Molly. You know that. They sat at one of the tables, the restaurant empty now except for the three of them. Evangeline served the food, and when Molly gestured for her to sit and eat as well, she hesitated before taking a chair. How is the ranch doing? Molly asked Zachary. Getting by. Had some good rain this summer, so the garden's producing well. Cattle are healthy. Could use more hands, but cannot afford to hire right now. Making do. You still out there all alone, he shrugged. Suits me well enough. Man your age should have a family by now. Molly. His tone was gently warning, but there was affection in it. What? I am just saying. You are not getting any younger. Neither are you, and I do not see you married. I was married. Once was enough. But Molly was smiling. She turned to Evangeline. Zach's father started that ranch 30 years ago, built it from nothing. Zach was born there, raised there. It is in his blood. My father died 2 years back, Zachary said quietly. Left me the place. I have been trying to keep it going the way he would have wanted. I am sorry for your loss, Evangeline said softly. Thank you. His eyes met hers, and again she felt that strange flutter in her chest. What made you leave the convent? The question should have felt intrusive, but coming from him, it felt genuine. She found herself wanting to answer honestly. I needed to know who I was outside those walls. My father sent me there after my mother died. I was 8 years old. The sisters were kind, and I was grateful for the safety and education they provided. But I never felt called to take final vows. I felt called to something else, though I could not name it. So I left to find out what that something else might be. That takes courage, or foolishness. Maybe they are the same thing sometimes, he said, and his smile was gentle. After he left that night, Molly gave Evangeline a long look. That one's a good man, lonely but good. I barely know him. I am just saying, a woman could do worse. Molly, I have been free of the convent for less than a month. I am not looking for a husband. Who said anything about a husband? I am talking about a friend. Everyone needs friends. But Evangeline lay awake that night thinking about storm-gray eyes and a warm smile, and wondering what it meant that her heart had beaten faster at the simple brush of a hand against hers. Zachary started coming to the restaurant more often. At first, Evangeline told herself it was coincidence, that he had always been a regular customer, and she simply had not noticed before. But there was no denying the way his face brightened when he saw her, or the way he always seemed to choose a table in her section, or how he lingered over his coffee, talking with her during the lulls between customers. He told her about the ranch, about the work of raising cattle and growing vegetables, about the satisfaction of seeing things grow under his care. She told him about learning to live in a world without bells marking the hours, about the strange joy of choosing what to wear each day even when the choice was only between 2 plain dresses, about discovering that she liked the taste of coffee and the sound of rain on a roof that was her own. You should come see the ranch sometime, he said one afternoon in late August. It is beautiful this time of year. I do not think that would be proper, she said automatically, the convent training rising up. Bring Molly along if you want. Or I could pick you up on a Sunday afternoon when you have time off. Show you around, bring you back before dark. Nothing improper about a buggy ride in broad daylight. The thought terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. "I will think about it." "You do that," he said, and his smile suggested he knew she would say yes eventually. She asked Molly about it that evening while they were cleaning up after the supper rush. "Should I go?" "You want to go?" "I think so, but I am not sure what it means." "If I go—" Molly set down the plate she was washing and looked at Evangeline with kind but serious eyes. "Honey, you left the convent to choose your own life. That means making your own decisions, taking your own chances. If you want to see his ranch, go see his ranch. If you want to spend time with him, spend time with him. You are the only one who gets to decide what it means. I have never been courted. I do not know the rules. There are no rules, not really. Just two people getting to know each other, seeing if they fit. Sometimes they do, sometimes they do not. Only way to find out is to try." When Zachary came in 2 days later, Evangeline said yes before she could lose her nerve. Sunday afternoon arrived bright and clear. Evangeline changed into her better dress, still plain but made of a nicer fabric, and pinned her hair in a softer style that allowed a few curls to frame her face. When she looked at herself in the small mirror above the washstand, she barely recognized the woman looking back. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes bright with anticipation. She looked alive. Zachary arrived promptly at 2 o'clock, driving a small buggy pulled by a handsome bay horse. He helped her up onto the seat, his hand warm and strong around hers, and she tried not to think about how right it felt to be sitting beside him as they drove out of town. The ranch was about 5 miles out, down a road that wound through prairie grass and scattered groves of trees. Zachary pointed out landmarks as they went, the creek where he fished sometimes, the hill where wildflowers grew thick in spring, the old oak tree that had been struck by lightning the year before but still stood, scarred but surviving. "There," he said as they crested a small rise. "That is home." The ranch house was modest but well built, with a wide porch and windows that caught the afternoon light. Beyond it stretched a barn, several outbuildings, corrals with cattle grazing peacefully, and gardens bursting with late summer vegetables. It was not grand, but it was clearly tended with care, and there was something about it that spoke of permanence and peace. "It is beautiful," Evangeline said softly. "Come on, I will show you around." He helped her down from the buggy and led her first to the gardens, pointing out tomatoes heavy on the vine, squash sprawling across the earth, beans climbing their poles, potatoes ready for harvest. His hands were gentle as he showed her how to check if a tomato was ripe, and she marveled at the knowledge in his calloused fingers. The barn smelled of hay and horses, and the cattle in the near pasture looked up with mild interest as they passed. He introduced her to his horse, a gentle mare named Clover who nuzzled Evangeline's palm looking for treats. "I do not have much," Evangeline said, laughing. "I did not know to bring anything." "She likes you anyway," Zachary said. "Animals are good judges of character." Inside the house, he seemed suddenly shy, as if seeing the space through her eyes and finding it lacking. But Evangeline looked around with genuine interest at the simple furniture, the clean floors, the window over the sink that looked out on the garden, the stone fireplace that would warm the room in winter. "Did you build all this yourself?" "My father built the original house. I have added on over the years. Built the new barn 3 years ago, still working on improvements as I can afford them. It is a good home. It is lonely sometimes," he admitted, "but it is mine. I know every board, every nail, spent my whole life here." She understood what he was not quite saying, the echo of her own journey in his words. He had been given this life, this place, but he had also chosen it, made it his own through work and care. They sat on the porch as the afternoon stretched toward evening, drinking cool water from his well, talking about everything and nothing. He told her about his childhood, about learning to ride before he could read, about his mother who had died when he was 15, about his father teaching him to build and plant and tend. She told him about the convent, about Sister Margaret who had taught her to read, about the garden there where she had first put her hands in soil, about the gradual realization that she wanted more than the cloister could offer. "What do you want?" he asked quietly. "Now that you are free to choose." She was silent for a long moment, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of amber and rose. "I want to matter. I want my life to mean something beyond following someone else's rules. I want to wake up in the morning and feel like the day belongs to me. I want to know what it is like to love someone and be loved in return, not out of duty or obligation, but because we choose each other." When she turned to look at him, his expression was so intense it made her breath catch. "What if I said, I wanted to be part of that life you are choosing?" His voice was rough with emotion. "What if I asked you to choose this life here with me?" Her heart was hammering so hard she was sure he could hear it. "Zachary, we have only known each other a few weeks. I know. And if you need more time, I will wait. I will wait as long as you need. But I have to tell you how I feel, Evangeline. From the moment you looked at me in Molly's restaurant, I felt something I have never felt before. Like I was seeing my future walking toward me. I know it sounds crazy. It does not sound crazy," she whispered. "Then what does it sound like?" "Like something I feel too." He reached for her hand, and this time she did not pull away. His fingers threaded through hers, and the simple contact sent warmth flooding through her entire body. "I am not asking you to marry me tomorrow," he said, though his eyes suggested he would if she wanted. "I am just asking you to think about it, about us, about whether this could be what you are looking for." "I left the convent to choose my own life," she said slowly. "Then choose this one with me." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of everything he was offering: his home, his heart, his future. "Choose me, and I will spend every day trying to make you glad you did." The sun was setting in earnest now, painting the world in gold and crimson. In that moment, sitting on his porch with her hand in his, Evangeline felt something slot into place inside her chest, like a key turning in a lock she had not known was there. "I want to," she said. "I am just afraid." "Of what?" "That I will not know how to be what you need, that I will fail, that I will not be enough." He lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "You already are enough, more than enough. And as for knowing how, we will figure it out together. That is what love is, I think. Choosing someone and then learning them day by day." "Is that what this is?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Love, on my part, yes. I love you, Evangeline Owens. I know it is fast, and I know you might think I am mad, but I love you." Tears sprang to her eyes, but they were not sad tears. They were the tears of someone who had been wandering in the dark and suddenly found light. "I think I love you too," she said. "I did not know what it would feel like, but I think this is it." He pulled her close then, and she went into his arms like coming home. He held her carefully, as if she was precious, and she rested her head against his chest and listened to the steady beat of his heart. They stayed like that until the stars began to appear, until Evangeline reluctantly said she needed to get back before Molly worried. On the drive back to town, Zachary kept one hand on the reins and one hand holding hers, and they talked about the future in careful, hopeful terms. "I would not ask you to give up working at the restaurant if you did not want to," he said. "I know you value your independence." "I would want to help with the ranch," she said. "If that is something you would want." "Want?" "Evangeline, having a partner in this, someone to share the work and the rewards, that is all I have dreamed of. But I would never force you into a life you did not choose." "I am choosing it," she said firmly. "I am choosing you." The next weeks passed in a blur of happiness. Zachary courted her properly, coming to town when he could spare time from the ranch, bringing her wildflowers and fresh vegetables, taking her on drives and walks. Molly watched with approval and gave Evangeline bits of advice about love and marriage that made the younger woman blush. They were married in October, when the leaves were turning gold and the air had the first crisp edge of autumn. It was a small ceremony at the church in Galesburg, with Molly standing up for Evangeline and one of Zachary's neighboring ranchers serving as his witness. The minister spoke about love and commitment and the sacred bond of marriage, and when Zachary slipped the simple gold band onto her finger, Evangeline felt the last shadow of the convent fall away. She was not Sister Evangeline or even Evangeline the restaurant worker. She was Evangeline Dalton, wife and partner and woman who had chosen her own path. The ranch became her home, and she threw herself into learning its rhythms with the same dedication she had once given to prayer. Zachary was a patient teacher, showing her how to tend the cattle, how to read the sky for weather, how to coax the best yield from the garden. She brought her own skills to the partnership. She organized the house with efficiency. She kept careful records of expenses and income. She learned to cook heartier meals than Molly's restaurant had required, and she discovered a talent for preserving food that would see them through the long Illinois winters. But beyond the work, there was joy. There was waking up beside Zachary each morning and seeing love in his eyes. There was working side by side in the garden, their shoulders brushing, their laughter mingling. There was sitting on the porch in the evenings, her head on his shoulder, watching the sun set over land that was theirs. There was learning the language of his body, the way his hands could be both strong and gentle, the way his kiss could make her forget everything except the moment they were in. Their first winter together was hard. A blizzard in January trapped them in the house for 3 days, and Evangeline learned what it meant to fight against the cold to keep animals alive, to ration supplies carefully, to find warmth in each other when the fire burned low. But they survived, and when spring came, it felt earned. In March, Evangeline realized she was pregnant. She told Zachary one evening after supper, watching his face transform from curiosity to wonder to pure joy. "Are you certain?" "As certain as I can be without seeing a doctor." "But yes, I am certain." He picked her up and spun her around, both of them laughing, and then set her down carefully as if she was made of glass. "I am going to be a father, and I am going to be a mother." The words felt strange and wonderful in her mouth. "I never imagined when I left the convent that this would be my life." "Are you happy?" She looked around their home, at the man she loved, at the future growing inside her, and smiled. "Happier than I ever dreamed possible." The pregnancy progressed well through spring and summer. Zachary fussed over her constantly, trying to prevent her from doing any heavy work, and she had to remind him that women had been having babies while working on farms for thousands of years. "I know," he said, "but none of those women were carrying my child." "Our child," she corrected, and kissed him until he stopped worrying, at least for a moment. Molly visited often, bringing supplies from town and advice about childbirth that was both practical and terrifying. "It hurts like nothing else," she said bluntly, "but then it is over and you have a baby, and somehow your body forgets the pain. Nature's trick to make sure the human race continues." "That is not comforting," Evangeline said. "It is not meant to be comforting. It is meant to be true." The baby came in early November, during a cold snap that had Zachary riding frantically to town to fetch the midwife. Evangeline labored through the night, and Molly had been right. It hurt more than anything she had ever experienced. But when the midwife finally placed a squalling, red-faced infant in her arms, all the pain evaporated like morning mist. "A boy," the midwife announced. "Healthy lungs on this one." Zachary was at her side immediately, staring at their son with an expression of absolute awe. "He is perfect." "He is loud," Evangeline said, but she was smiling through her exhaustion. "They named him Thomas, after Zachary's father. He was a good baby, or as good as any baby could be, waking at all hours to nurse, crying for reasons Evangeline could not always decipher, but also making small cooing sounds that melted her heart and gripping her finger with his tiny hand as if she was his whole world. Zachary was a devoted father from the start, walking the floor with Thomas when he was fussy, changing diapers without complaint, singing off-key lullabies that somehow soothed the baby to sleep. Watching him with their son, Evangeline fell even more deeply in love with her husband. The years that followed were full and rich. The ranch prospered slowly but steadily. They added more cattle, expanded the gardens, built a new chicken coop. Thomas grew from baby to toddler to small boy, full of energy and curiosity, helping with small chores and getting underfoot in equal measure. When Thomas was 3, Evangeline gave birth to twin girls. The pregnancy had been harder, her body struggling to carry 2 babies, and the birth itself was difficult enough that the midwife had been worried. But both girls came through healthy if small, and they named them Rose and Lily, after the flowers that bloomed in Evangeline's carefully tended garden. With 3 small children, the ranch became even busier. Evangeline's days were full of cooking and cleaning and washing and tending, but also of watching Thomas teach his younger sisters to collect eggs, of seeing Zachary carry all 3 children on his shoulders at once, of family meals around the table that rang with laughter and chatter. Money was sometimes tight, especially with 3 mouths to feed, but they always managed. Zachary's vegetables continued to sell well in town, and they had developed a reputation for quality beef. Evangeline took in occasional sewing work, her convent training proving useful, and between them, they made enough to keep the ranch running and slowly make improvements. When Thomas was 8, he started school in Galesburg, riding into town each morning with his father when Zachary made deliveries, staying with Molly until afternoon when Zachary returned to collect him. The twins would start in a few years, and the thought of the house being quiet during the days made Evangeline both sad and relieved. Life settled into a rhythm, the seasons turning, the children growing, the ranch enduring. There were hard times: a drought one summer that decimated the garden, a winter so cold they lost several head of cattle, a bout of influenza that swept through Galesburg and had Evangeline terrified for her children's health. But there were more good times than bad. Bumper crops, healthy calves, children's birthdays, quiet evenings on the porch after the work was done. One evening in the summer of 1891, 13 years after Evangeline had first walked out of the convent gates, she and Zachary sat on that same porch, watching their children chase fireflies in the gathering dusk. Thomas was 11 now, tall and lean like his father, already starting to take on real responsibility with the ranch work. The twins were 8, Rose quiet and thoughtful, Lily bold and adventurous, but both devoted to each other and to their older brother. "You ever regret it?" Zachary asked quietly. "Regret what? Leaving the convent, choosing this life instead?" Evangeline looked at her husband, at the gray just starting to show at his temples, at the lines around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun, at the hands scarred from hard work, and felt her heart swell with love so fierce it almost hurt. "Not for a single moment," she said. "You asked me to choose this life with you, and it was the best choice I ever made." He reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long practice. "I asked you to choose me, and you made me the luckiest man alive." They sat in comfortable silence, hands linked, watching their children play. This was not the life anyone had planned for Evangeline when her grieving father had left her at the convent all those years ago. It was better. It was hers. The children grew older, as children do. Thomas turned into a young man who loved the ranch as much as his father did, who had inherited Zachary's steady temperament and Evangeline's sharp mind for numbers. The twins remained close as they navigated the complexities of adolescence, Rose becoming an accomplished seamstress who helped her mother with sewing work, Lily developing a gift with animals that made her invaluable when it came to training horses and doctoring sick cattle. In 1895, when Thomas was 17, he asked if he could start courting Eliza Parker, the daughter of a neighboring rancher. Zachary and Evangeline exchanged glances across the dinner table, seeing their son nervous and hopeful, remembering what it felt like to be young and in love. "Does she know you want to court her?" Evangeline asked gently. "I think so. I hope so. I have not exactly been subtle." Zachary bit back a smile. "Then I suppose you should ask her father's permission if that is what you want." "It is what I want," Thomas said firmly. "I love her." And so the cycle continued. Thomas courted Eliza with Zachary's guidance and Evangeline's encouragement, and by Christmas of that year, they were engaged. The wedding was planned for the following summer, after the spring planting was done, and before the harvest season began in earnest. Evangeline helped Eliza sew her wedding dress, remembering her own simple ceremony, and found joy in welcoming another woman into their family. The wedding was held at the same Galesburg church where she and Zachary had married, and when the young couple exchanged vows, Evangeline cried tears of happiness. Thomas and Eliza built a small house on the far edge of the ranch property, close enough to be part of the family operation but far enough to have their own space. They worked the land alongside Zachary and Evangeline, and the ranch continued to grow with the addition of young hands and fresh ideas. The twins were courted in their turn. Rose married a banker from Galesburg, a quiet man named Henry who adored her and gave her the security she craved. They moved into town, and Rose continued her sewing work, building a small business that catered to the growing population. Lily, true to form, surprised everyone by falling in love with a horse trainer who passed through town, a man named Jack who shared her passion for animals. They married and settled on a small property adjacent to the ranch, raising horses and running a breeding program that became well known throughout the county. By the turn of the century, Evangeline and Zachary were grandparents several times over. Thomas and Eliza had 3 children in quick succession. Rose and Henry had 2. Lily and Jack had 4, each as wild and animal-loving as their mother. The ranch that had once been quiet except for 2 voices was now full of life, with grandchildren running through the fields, learning to ride, helping with chores, filling the air with noise and laughter. Zachary's hair went fully gray and his back started to ache after long days of work, but he refused to slow down entirely. "I will rest when I am dead," he told Evangeline, who rolled her eyes but understood. This land, this life, was in his blood. Evangeline herself had aged gracefully, her auburn hair streaked with silver, her hands showing the wear of decades of work, but her green eyes were still bright and sharp. She moved a bit slower now, tired more easily, but she remained the heart of the family, the one who organized gatherings and remembered birthdays and made sure no one was forgotten or left out. In the summer of 1905, Molly died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 72. She had sold the restaurant years earlier, but had remained in Galesburg, a frequent visitor to the ranch and a beloved honorary grandmother to all the children. Her death hit Evangeline hard, This woman who had given her a chance when no one else would, who had become her first real friend in the outside world. At the funeral, Evangeline spoke about Molly's kindness, her sharp tongue that hit a soft heart, her belief in second chances. She taught me that choosing your own life meant being brave enough to take risks, Evangeline said. And she taught me that true friendship does not judge, it simply supports. Zachary held her hand through the service and through the grief that followed, just as he had held her hand through every joy and sorrow of their nearly 30 years together. The ranch itself had become something of an institution in the area. The Dalton family was known for fair dealing, quality products, and strong values. Young people from town sometimes came to work for a season, learning about ranching and farming from Zachary and Thomas and Lily's husband Jack. The gardens that Evangeline had once learned to tend were now extensive and productive, feeding not just the family but providing excess to sell in town. On their 30th wedding anniversary, in October of 1908, the entire family gathered for a celebration. Children and grandchildren filled the house and yard, and Evangeline stood on the porch, looking out at the chaos and love, marveling at how far she had come from that scared young woman who had walked out of the convent. Zachary came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, and she leaned back against him, comfortable and content. 30 years, he murmured into her hair. Best 30 years of my life. Mine too, she said. I was so afraid that day you first asked me to consider a life with you. Afraid I would not know how to be a wife, a mother, a partner. And now I know that love is not something you know how to do. It is something you learn by doing it day after day, year after year. You taught me that. He turned her in his arms so she faced him, and his eyes were as warm as they had been 3 decades ago when he first told her he loved her. We taught each other. That is what partnership means. They kissed, a gentle press of lips that spoke of years of intimacy and affection, and their grandchildren giggled and made dramatic sounds of disgust while their children smiled, recognizing the kind of love they all hoped to build in their own marriages. The celebration lasted into the evening, with food and music and stories. Thomas told the tale of the time his father tried to teach him to ride and ended up in the horse trough himself. Lily recalled her mother nursing a wounded owl back to health and then crying when it flew away. Rose spoke about learning to sew at her mother's side, the patience Evangeline had shown with every crooked stitch. When the sun set and the guests began to leave, the grandchildren were put to bed in various rooms throughout the house, a chaotic jumble of sleeping children that made Evangeline smile. This was what she had built, not just a ranch or a marriage, but a legacy of love. That night, lying in bed beside Zachary, she thought about the long road that had brought her here. Leaving the convent had been the hardest and bravest thing she had ever done. Everything else, finding work, meeting Zachary, building this life, had flowed from that one choice. "What are you thinking about?" Zachary asked, his voice sleepy. "About choices," she said. "About how one brave decision can change everything." "You changed everything," he said. "For me, for our children, for everyone whose life you have touched." "We changed everything together," she corrected. "You asked me to choose this life with you, and I said yes. But you chose me too, Zachary. You chose to love a woman who did not know anything about ranching or marriage or being a wife. You chose to be patient while I learned. That was your gift to me. Loving you was never a choice," he said quietly. "It was inevitable, like breathing." She rolled over to face him, finding his hand in the darkness. "I love you. I will love you until the day I die, and beyond that if such things are possible." "They are possible," he said, "because I will love you the same way." They fell asleep like that, hands linked, hearts entwined, the way they had been for 30 years and would be for however many years remained to them. The years continued to pass. Zachary's health began to fail slowly in his early 60s. His back that had ached became a source of constant pain, and arthritis made his hands stiff in the mornings. But he refused to stop working entirely, modified his days to work within his limitations, and relied increasingly on Thomas to handle the heavy labor. Evangeline herself remained relatively healthy, though her knees protested stairs and her eyes required spectacles for reading. She spent more time in the garden and less time on the harder physical work, and she devoted increasing energy to her grandchildren, teaching them to read and sew and cook, passing on the knowledge the sisters had given her all those years ago. In the spring of 1912, Zachary fell ill with pneumonia. It started as a cough, became a fever, and within days he was bedridden, fighting for each breath. The doctor came from town, did what he could, but told Evangeline privately that at Zachary's age and with his weakened constitution, the outcome was uncertain. She nursed him day and night, sitting by his bed, sponging his fevered forehead, coaxing him to drink water and broth. The children and grandchildren visited in a steady stream, and Zachary smiled at each one, though it clearly cost him effort. On the fourth night, when the fever was at its worst and Evangeline was terrified she would lose him, he opened his eyes and looked at her with sudden clarity. "I am not ready to leave you," he said, his voice rough but determined. "Then do not leave me," she said fiercely. "Fight, Zachary. Please fight. I have had a good life," he continued as if she had not spoken. "But I am not done yet. There is more I want to see, more grandchildren to hold, more sunsets on our porch, more mornings waking up beside you." "Then live," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Live, and you will have all of that and more." He lived. The fever broke that night, and though the recovery was long and slow, he came back to them. By summer he was up and moving again, thinner and frailer than before, but alive. The family celebrated his 64th birthday in August with profound gratitude, aware of how close they had come to losing him. Zachary's brush with death changed him in subtle ways. He spoke more often about gratitude, about not taking any day for granted. He made sure to tell each of his children and grandchildren that he loved them. He held Evangeline's hand more often, told her he loved her at least 3 times a day, and watched sunsets with an intensity that suggested he was memorizing them. "I am not afraid of dying," he told Evangeline one evening, "but I am greedy for more time with you." "Then we will take whatever time we are given and make the most of it," she said. They had 9 more years together. 9 years of watching grandchildren grow and great-grandchildren arrive. 9 years of garden harvests and family dinners and quiet moments on the porch. 9 years of love that had deepened and matured like fine wine, becoming richer with each passing season. Zachary died in his sleep in the autumn of 1921, 2 days after their 43rd wedding anniversary. Evangeline woke to find him gone, his face peaceful, his hand still resting in hers. The grief was enormous, a tidal wave that threatened to drown her, but she clung to the gratitude that he had not suffered, that he had died as he had lived with quiet dignity. The funeral brought people from all over the county. Zachary had been respected and loved, known as a fair man, a good neighbor, a devoted father and grandfather. Evangeline stood at the graveside, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and spoke about the man who had asked a frightened young woman to choose a life with him. "He taught me what it meant to truly live," she said. "Not just exist, but to embrace each day as a gift. He taught me that love is not about grand gestures, but about showing up every day and choosing each other again and again. He was my partner, my friend, my love, and I will carry him in my heart until we meet again." After his death, Evangeline moved into the small house Thomas and Eliza had built, giving them the main house as was proper. She spent her days in the garden with her grandchildren, reading the books she had always loved and remembering. The grief eased slowly, never disappearing but becoming something she could carry. She lived another 15 years, watching her family continue to grow and thrive. She held great-great-grandchildren, saw the ranch expand under Thomas's management, and witnessed the world change in ways she could never have imagined as a young woman leaving the convent. Automobiles replaced horses, electricity came to the rural areas, the world grew smaller and faster. But some things remained constant. The land, the family, the legacy of love she and Zachary had built together. Evangeline died peacefully in the spring of 1936, at the age of 80. She was sitting in the garden, the same garden she had tended for nearly 60 years, when her heart simply stopped. Her great-granddaughter found her there, a slight smile on her face, as if she had seen something wonderful. At her funeral, her children spoke of her courage in leaving the only life she had known to choose her own path. Her grandchildren spoke of her patience and wisdom. Her great-grandchildren spoke of her stories about the old days, about a time when the West was still wild and life was simpler. But it was Rose, her quiet daughter, who perhaps said it best. "My mother taught us that we are not defined by where we come from, but by the choices we make and the love we give. She chose to leave the safety of the convent. She chose to love our Father. She chose to build a life rather than simply live one. And in making those choices, she gave us all a gift, the example of a woman who was brave enough to write her own story." They buried her beside Zachary, under the oak tree on the hill that overlooked the ranch. The stone marker was simple, bearing their names and dates and a single line that Thomas had chosen. They chose each other. The ranch continued, passing down through generations, each one adding their own chapter to the story. But it all traced back to that moment in 1878 when a young woman walked out of a convent and into an uncertain future, and to the cowboy who had seen her and known, somehow, that she was his destiny. Their story became family legend, told and retold to children and grandchildren, embellished slightly with each telling but always holding the same essential truth: that love is a choice, and the right choice can change everything. In the 21st century, descendants of Evangeline and Zachary still gather at the ranch for reunions, still walk the land they worked, still visit the graves under the oak tree. The house has been updated and modernized, but the bones are the same ones Zachary's father built all those years ago. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the sun is setting and the light hits the porch just right, people swear they can feel it. The echo of a great love, the imprint of two people who chose each other against all odds and built something that would outlast them both. Because in the end, that is what love does. It endures. It creates. It echoes down through generations, shaping lives not yet lived, touching people not yet born. Evangeline left the convent to choose her own life. Zachary asked her to choose one with him. And in saying yes, in taking that leap of faith, they created something that would never die. A family, a legacy, a love story for the ages. The ranch still stands, a testament to their vision and labor. The land still yields its harvests, worked now by great-great-great-grandchildren who have never met Evangeline or Zachary but who carry their DNA and their dreams. The oak tree still shades their graves, and on the stone marker, those simple words still tell their story. They chose each other. And in choosing each other, they chose everything that came after. The children and grandchildren, the struggles and triumphs, the quiet moments and the loud celebrations, the grief and the joy, the ordinary and the extraordinary. They chose a life together, and it was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything. Somewhere in the turning of seasons and the passing of years, in the laughter of children playing in fields their ancestors planted, in the enduring strength of family bonds forged in love and tested by time, the story continues. Evangeline and Zachary's story, the cowboy and the woman who left the convent, living on in every choice their descendants make, in every moment of courage, in every act of love. Because that is what choosing your own life means. Not just deciding for yourself, but deciding for all those who will come after, creating ripples that spread farther than you can see, building something that lasts longer than you can imagine. Evangeline chose freedom. Zachary chose love. Together, they chose each other, and that choice echoed down through time, shaping a future neither of them could have predicted but both would have been proud to see. Their love was not always easy, but it was always worth it. Their life was not always smooth, but it was always theirs. And in the end, that was all that mattered. They had lived fully, loved deeply, and left behind something beautiful that would never fade. The story of Evangeline Owens and Zachary Dalton is not just their story. It is the story of anyone who has ever been brave enough to step into the unknown, to choose love over fear, to build something with their own hands and their own heart. It is a reminder that our choices matter, that courage can be found in the smallest decisions, and that love, real, true, chosen love can transform not just 2 lives, but generations. And so the story ends where all good stories should, with love triumphant, with family gathered, with the land enduring, and with the promise that what was built with care will last. Evangeline left the convent to choose her own life. The cowboy said, "Choose this one with me." And in that choice, in that moment of brave surrender to possibility, everything began. Everything good, everything lasting, everything that matters. They chose each other, and it made all the difference.